Better late than never. Welcome to the May reading wrap up. Hi everyone, my name is Ashley. Welcome back to my channel. I'm gonna do my May reading wrap up in this video. I actually filmed it before, but I didn't really like it, and so I'm filming it again like towards the end of the month, and so let's hope I can get this out soon. And I know it's late, but I still wanted to talk about the books that I read in May because I read some pretty freaking amazing books. I read 10 books in May. My average rating was 4.19 stars, which is really good. Such a redemption from the not so great reading month that was April. And so let's just get right into it. So for the first time, I'm actually not going to talk about all the books that I read in the order that I read them, because I pretty much read all the books in the Hunger Games series this month, so I figured I'd kind of talk about them all at once towards the end. And so let's just start with like the other books that I read in May. And the first one that I want to talk about is A Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. I am so happy that I finally got to this book this in May. I have been wanting to read this book for years, for so long, and I finally committed to reading it in May, and I'm so glad that I did. This book was incredible. I gave this book 5 stars. It was incredible. I hold it so near and dear to my heart. I feel like the way I'm about to describe this book might sound weird, but this book was like the first book where I really felt like I was reading a story. I know all books tell a story, but this book literally felt like a fable, like one of those tall tales that gets passed down from like generations to generations, like one of those stories that you tell around like the fireplace or the dinner table. And it was just fantastic. So many characters, so many moving parts, but I saw that some people saw it as a negative. I actually really liked it because every character played a purpose. So even if a character was only mentioned like once or twice, they still played a big role in the overall narrative, and that's actually what I love about this book. I'm a big believer in like the butterfly effect and like the invisible string theory, and I feel like that it kind of guides how I live my life, in the sense of like, you never know what had to happen for you to end up where you were. You never know what random decision someone had to make like however long ago that could impact like literally the trajectory of your life. And I think as a person, I feel like that's why it's important to live with like purpose and intentionality and not be selfish and think everything is me, because you never know what action you could do that could negatively impact someone else. And I feel like this was portrayed so well in this book. There is a lot that happens. I don't want to give anything away. I mean, basically it's just about this town in Pennsylvania that primarily Black and Jewish residents preside, or I wouldn't say, but Black and white, but the focus is on like a lot of the Black and Jewish communities in this book. And then there is like a little boy who is deaf, who the state is looking to institutionalize. And then it kind of just tells the story of that whole journey and whole process. Literally, this book was fantastic. Like I said, so many moving parts, so many little things that all came together towards the end. I really felt like it went full circle, and then I love the messaging in this book as well. This book takes place in like the 70s, or actually it takes place before, like it spans like a couple of years. But it really, like, he really did a really good job of just showing like race relations in America, but also just how silly the idea of racism was, because even back then, like, of course if you were Black you were treated horribly, but it was also like if you weren't a certain kind of white person, you were also discriminated against. Like if you were white, like, or even if you were like Eastern European and you're still white, you were discriminated against. If you were Jewish, you were discriminated against. It's basically like if you were anything other than like an English or French, what's it called, like Presbyterian, like Christian person, unless you were that, you were going to be looked at differently. Even if you were Italian, Polish, you are still going to get the side eye, which was just so fascinating because I feel like so much of race relation talk like is about like white people versus black people, but it's like even the Jewish people were treated differently because of their religion. And so just him just exploring those dynamics within the book as well was just so interesting, because I feel like that's a part of like history and race relation that isn't really talked about as much. And I just feel like it puts so much into perspective of just, again, just how silly racism is. It's one of, it's like, who cares, you know? But it's like literally every little thing about you that's different is subject to be nitpicked and treated differently. But yeah, that's The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. I hope if you've never read this book before, I've convinced you to read it. It is historical fiction, which I know can seem daunting or maybe not be everyone's favorite genre, but I really do think if you like fairy tales, if you like tall tales, you'll really like this book. Not because there's any magic in it, but just because I think the way he told the story literally felt like I was reading like an Aesop's like fable or something. It was great. That was The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. And then the next book that I want to talk about is What Should Have Been Ours by Faith Pinkay. Faith is one of the girls in this book club that I'm a part of, and she wrote a whole book, and I was so grateful to be able to read like an early copy of the book. The book comes out June 28th, so I don't know if this video is going to be uploaded on like the last day of June or before June 28th. But if it is, like, I really hope, if there's the book club girls love to support and watch my videos, so I'm so grateful for them. But if you're outside of the book club and you've never like heard of this book before, like, I really encourage you to just go out and buy it. This book is a romance. It's a second chance romance. It follows Cameron and Gabrielle. They both met while they were receiving treatment for cancer when they were children, and they basically fell in love, but then they lost touch, and then it isn't until many years later where they reconnect, and you get to see their whole love story unfold. If you like to sob, if you love sad romances, I would highly suggest this book. If you love emotional romances, this book is literally the poster child for it. I actually typically don't gravitate towards like very emotional romances, but I really did enjoy this book. You're just so rooting for them, and it was beautiful. It was just truly so beautiful to read. I gave it 4 stars again. Just incredible. And so please just support Faith. This book is fantastic. I will literally recommend this to everybody. And so if you like a little bit of a deeper... Oh, I remembered what I wanted to say about this book. If you love also male yearning, like the guy literally just pining after the girl and just chasing after her, you are going to love this book. This is what I loved. Like, I just love seeing a woman pursued, and you're definitely going to get that in this book as well. So this is What Should Have Been Ours. And then the next book that I want to talk about, I listened to over on audiobook. It was Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams, I believe. This is basically like the famous expose on Facebook that everyone is talking about. She was an ex-employee, and she basically just talks about all the craziness that happened while she was working for Facebook. She basically worked on like their foreign relations team. And some crazy stuff is revealed in this book. I feel like in more recent years, I've casted a weary eye on Facebook, and it's like I don't have a super positive like look on billionaires or super mega greedy rich people in general. So I was never really a fan of Mark Zuckerberg anyways. But this book really just like blew it over the water. I've heard stuff that Mark Zuckerberg is trying to like prevent this book from being like published more, or like trying to get it taken away. I don't know, but I don't know how that works. But I know he's not happy about what's revealed in the book, and if I were him, I wouldn't be happy either. But yeah, I mean, it basically just shows the carelessness about how Facebook treats like its algorithm and its employees, and even her, just her talking about the horrible things she's had to deal with, from sexual assault, from like literally almost dying, having traumatizing birth, and like literally they still expect her to come into work and not take any break, is like literally actually insane. I think I gave it 4 stars. The book did lag a little bit for me, like in the middle, but then it kind of picked back up. I will say the thing that I didn't love about this book is that I feel like Sarah was very willing to critique, but I feel like she didn't do enough acknowledgement or exploration of the role that she may have played and some of these bad things happening, as far as like Facebook not censoring posts or allowing hateful comments to spew and everything. Again, like it was good, but, and again, like I completely understand, like at the end of the day, like you need a job, so sometimes even if a job is toxic, like in order to just survive you have to stay. But sometimes I just wish that she addressed it more, because sometimes it's so easy to point the finger at someone else without like realizing the role that you may have played and take some responsibility in that. Obviously no one is a perfect person, but I just think maybe if she explored that, I think she did mention it a little bit, but I think if she explored that a little bit more, I would have appreciated the book better. And then the next book that I want to talk about is Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. 5 stars, literally 5 stars. This book was the book club's pick for May, and I'm so happy. I've wanted to read this book for a long time, and it was literally freaking incredible. Like, this book follows Tully and Kate. It's basically a coming of age story, which is one of my favorites. Like, you follow them from when they meet as teenagers up until adulthood. Like all Kristen Hanna books, if you want to sob, read this book. And yeah, I think if you just love coming of age stories and you like books that are very emotional and you like exploring female friendships, I think you'll really like this book. I will say, Tully, literally not my favorite character. And I feel like actually this book, it explores a lot about friendship, but I also, one of the biggest takeaways I actually got from this book, especially towards the end, was not just the relationship between friends, but between like mothers and their children. A big, I don't want to like spoil too much, but a big like theme in this book is the really toxic relationship that Kate has with her daughter. And low-key, I hated her daughter in this book. Her daughter's a little brat, but like, I'm sorry, I am not pro spanking, but like that is a child that needs to be spanked. I'm sorry, like literally, like that is the definition of a child. Mara is the definition of a child that needs to be spanked. But reading just like the struggles that Kate was having as her mom, and just trying to do her best by Kate, trying to do her best by Mara, it was like heartbreaking, and just really just had me thinking about like my own relationship with my mom, and like me possibly having kids, and like, oh my god, like what if my kids hate me? Like it was very emotional. And so like all Kristen Hanna books, she also never gives a trigger warning, so there are themes of like sexual assault, like terminal illness, toxic familial relationships, you know, parental abandonment. And so I would just give that caveat before you go into the book, but otherwise I literally thought it was incredible. I didn't want to put it down ever. It was just, I don't know, it was just fantastic. I loved it. I loved seeing both of the women come into their own, and I feel like Kristen Hanna does a good job at writing characters that are very, very real. Like, they're going through real stuff, and they're not perfect, but you could just, it's just a perfect picture of the human experience, and I loved it. And then the last book that I want to talk about before I get into my Hunger Games rant is A Well-Trained Wife by Tia Levings. This is a memoir that I've heard about for a while. I was actually a little bit hesitant to read it, but I finally decided to. It's about a woman who basically like grows up in, but really like gets married into like this extremely toxic Christian patriarchy, and it kind of just goes through all the abuse and just the horrible things that she's had to endure while she's in her marriage, and then what she did to break out of it. It really was heartbreaking, but I think stories like hers are so important, especially when we talk about like religious extremism and religious just like, I don't know what other word to describe it, but just becoming almost so devoted to a religion to the point where instead of like following it out of genuine love, like you're led by fear, which I think is wrong. And I think that's the basis of all these legalistic religions. And especially myself as a Christian, I was a little bit nervous to read this book because obviously, like, I want to make this caveat. I am very, very pro people questioning their faith, deciding what they believe, questioning, like, if you were brought up religious, just questioning, like, what did I really learn growing up? Like, is this true? But, you know, I'm someone who's done that and has kind of come out on the other side where I still have faith, even though it may look a little bit different than it did before. But I don't really like books that necessarily completely bash Christianity because, as much as like people's experiences with bad experiences in the church are completely valid, at the same time I think it's important to just recognize that not all Christians are like that, not all Christian denominations are like that. And so I was a little bit nervous that this book would kind of have a final conclusion of like all Christianity is horrible and bad, even though she would be valid in her feelings. I don't want to invalidate that, but it's more just like that's just not true. But this book wasn't really that. It kind of just focused on her own journey of just literally getting rid of the abuse. You even see as she's questioning things, like she's still trying to hold on to some like aspect of faith, but at the end of the day, sometimes I do think it's important to just let go of things that just are not serving you anymore. And I think that extreme religion and religious like toxicity that she was brought up in just was not serving her. And so I really do hope that she's found peace. I mean, she's gone through so much and it's just disgusting, just like the way men in these extremely religious Christian patriarchal circles treat women like they're nothing but objects, like literally her body being treated as an object, like nothing more than a vessel for like male pleasure, and to just be bossed around like they're freaking children. It's actually insane. And so I'm very, very happy that she was able to get out of that. Like I said, like it's just heartbreaking that so many Christian denominations or so many Christians are led by this fear, because that fear really blocks you from experiencing true freedom and what a relationship with Christ is supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be this thing that produces so much anxiety of like, what am I doing next, what am I doing wrong, what do I have to do to be perfect. It's like not supposed to be about that at all. And so I'm glad that she made her way out of that toxic line of thinking. So that was A Well-Trained Wife. I didn't give that book a rating since it was a memoir, but let's get into The Hunger Games. So I reread all 3 Hunger Games books. I haven't read those books since middle school, and the book club was doing a Hunger Games like buddy read, and so I was like, this is like the perfect time to reread them. I wanted this year to be the year of like rereading books that I loved as a kid, and revisiting them. And so I'm so happy that I reread The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. The Hunger Games, I believe I gave 4.5 stars, Catching Fire 4 stars, and Mockingjay 3 stars. I feel like this is perfectly in line with my rating like growing up. The Hunger Games follows, I don't want to say too much about this book. I feel like everyone and their mother knows about The Hunger Games, so I can feel pretty good about leaving out spoilers, just because I feel like I don't even really need to describe it that deeply. But I would say the first Hunger Games book follows Katniss. She is a tribute in The Hunger Games, which is basically this annual games that the Capitol throws for the country of like Panem. Panem has 12 districts. The Capitol rules everything. This is the 74th Hunger Games, and 74 years before there was an uprising between the districts and the Capitol, and as punishment, the Capitol now makes each of the 12 districts send 2 children tributes to fight to the death in an arena. Sounds incredibly dystopian. This is YA dystopia. And yeah, we literally just follow Katniss in the games with Peeta, who's her male tribute, and the whole kind of series. And so I guess if you've never, so that's literally the foundation of everything you need to know about the Hunger Games. If you have never read the books, I would literally just stop the video right here, because everything from now on I can't talk about without spoiling anything. I can't even talk about like the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise on the Reaping without spoiling anything. So if you're new and you never read the Hunger Games, goodbye. Like, this is the end of the video. But to keep going, so then the ending of the Hunger Games, Katniss and Peeta both win, but in Catching Fire, because them both winning, like, basically at the end, like, they were literally like, we don't want to kill each other, so we're going to off ourselves, so there is no victor for the Capitol. And basically, you know, the Capitol, they need a victor, so they allow both of them to live, but they see it as an act of rebellion. So as punishment for the 75th Hunger Games, the Quarter Quell, which is like a special edition of the Hunger Games, they basically get thrown back into the arena. Literally at the end of the book, like, Katniss gets broken out of the arena by some rebels who are trying to overthrow the Capitol, and so Mockingjay literally follows the journey of Katniss and the rest of the rebels trying to overthrow the Capitol once and for all. I love the books. Mockingjay wasn't my favorite. I don't think it's most people's favorite, just because it was just, I feel bad saying this, it was just so different, and I feel like it got a little bit mundane at some parts. And Katniss just as a character, although it was very real, I just think the dynamics between everything was just very, very different, so it wasn't as engaging. But overall, I think the story was fantastic, of the Hunger Games overall. And I will say, the thing that I appreciate about especially Mockingjay was that there is no like happy ending. I mean, they've literally gone through so much more trauma than any human can literally imagine, and of course there's no real resolution for that. No matter how much therapy you have, you're probably always gonna have to live with that for the rest of your life. And so I'm kind of glad that the book kind of didn't give like a clean-cut happy ending. Katniss still isn't feeling super great, but her life is better, which I thought was very realistic. And then I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I gave The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes 3.75 stars. I'm actually kind of upset because I watched the movie last year, and I usually never watch movies before reading books, but I decided to go for a friend's birthday, and I kind of wish I didn't, because reading this book, all I kept thinking about was the movie. And I thought the movie was fantastic, but there were just so many things where, like, I don't know, I just kept comparing it to the movie, and I was like, oh, this is like a lot. And this book was extremely long. I think it was over 500 pages, if not almost 500 pages, and it did not need to be that long. The book was interesting. The book was President Snow's origin story. President Snow is basically op number 1 in all the Hunger Games trilogies. He's the one who like basically sabotages Katniss and, you know, hates all the district people. But this is kind of his origin story, and it's very, very interesting because you can tell like he actually grew up very, very impoverished, and he pretty much grew up with nothing. And it's so interesting because for a lot of people, those kind of circumstances might humble them, but for him it kind of really just gave him this like manic pursuit of power, and it was like, I want power so I never have to end up in this situation again. But it's one of those dynamics where that is fine, where you never want to be in the poor situation that you were before, but he allowed that to compromise his morals. And so you really see how, you know, he starts off as someone who wants to have a better situation. He ends up like falling in love a little bit, and you think he's gonna turn down a better path, but he doesn't. Like, when he finds out certain things, he just chooses to just abandon his values and just do this mad dash pursuit of power. And then the last book, the most recent book of the Hunger Games trilogy that was released this year, Sunrise on the Reaping. This is Haymitch's origin story. Haymitch is Katniss and Peeta's mentor in the Hunger Games because he's the only living District 12 victor. And this is basically his origin story. I gave it 4 stars. I will say, so I feel like I'm gonna summarize just my thoughts on the series as a whole with this book. I will say I do not think we need any more Hunger Games books. People are talking about, oh, we want Phoenix like book or origin story. I'm like, we do not need it. I think the issue with Sunrise on the Reaping is that I almost feel like this should have been the first book in the entire like series, like published. I think this should have been published even before the original trilogy happened, because aside from the epilogue, this book really doesn't spoil much. Like, I think this book sets up everything nicely for the rest of the books. And of course, reading this book, like in hindsight, like after knowing everything, it's like, okay, like it is cool to kind of make certain connections, but I really do feel like Sunrise on the Reaping should have been the first book, because I think the reason why this book wasn't higher than 4 stars was because it was very, very good. It was just so predictable. You already know what happens to Haymitch. You already know what happens to Haymitch from reading the first 3 Hunger Games books. And so you already know that when he gets thrown into the arena, he's going to survive. Like, he's going to make it out. And so I feel like his book should have been first, because there still could have been time for plot twists to happen, but it wouldn't have taken away from the original Hunger Games book, because let's say even if the Hunger Games was the second book, like Katniss and Peeta both winning still would have been enough of a plot twist. Them getting thrown back into the arena and catching fire still would have been enough of a plot twist. Sunrise on the Reaping wouldn't have taken away from that. But I feel like knowing Haymitch's story from the first 3 books, it was like, okay, like we kind of already know this already. Of course, you feel emotionally attached to him, so it's like one of those things where it's like, even though you know what's gonna happen, you're still like, oh, I hope it doesn't happen this way, but even though you already know that it does. So I was still able to get like the emotions out of it, but it just didn't hit as hard, because I was like, okay, so we know he has no family, we know he wins, we know he goes through all this trauma. Of course, getting the origins and the little nuances and the details and seeing how they fit into the previous books was cool, but at the same time, I feel like this book would have functioned better as like a book 1. In my opinion. But because of that, I really do feel like we do not need any more books, because we already know. Like, Finnick's story, sure, maybe a little bit of details and backstory would have been cool, but again, we already know he wins his games. We already know. And so I'm like, there is nothing else that really needs to be like done with this series. I think Sunrise on the Reaping, good, it closes everything out nicely. That is it. We do not need anything else. But it was still very good though, 4 stars. I'm so excited for the movie, so I just want to make that very, very clear. But yes, that is all the 10 books that I read in May. I hope whoever watched this video, hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you got some new books to add to your TBR. Right now I'm in the middle of my summer romance marathon in June, where I only read romance books for the summer, so I'm excited to kind of recap all of that at the end of the summer and try to create some other bookish videos in between. But yes, thank you everyone who's watching, and have just the most amazing day, week, life, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.